Hi, everyone. I wanted to do a slight starting introduction to introduce myself. I am Jamie Billman. I'm the Preservation Manager at the Preservation Alliance of West Virginia. I'm going to quickly put my contact information in the chat should you have any questions for me. Second. Feel free to write down my information should you have anything you want to talk about. But we're really excited to have you all here today for the meeting for Jeanne's lovely webinar. Really excited. I am also going to start by sharing a worksheet with you. Let me grab the link for that as well. It is a document of the websites that we'll be referencing, so you can have those and you don't have to worry about rushing to write them down at the end. When we share the recorded video, I will make sure that that is also shared as well for your reference, but there is a link to the document. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's anyone else in the waiting room, and it doesn't look like it, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jeanne. Make host. Okay, I think you should be able to share your PowerPoint now.
All right, great. I will do that.
Oh, and quickly, I will be monitoring the chat if you have any questions you think of, and I'll pass them along when we're ready for questions.
All right, good. Well, first, my name is Jeanne Finstein, and I'm a member of Friends of Wheeling, the local historic preservation organization. And I'd like to thank Jamie and Preservation Alliance for the opportunity to do this. Friends of Wheeling frequently has house tours or building tours, and we, as a thank you to the owners, will provide a history of the building. And most of the time, the owners have no clue who built the building or how old it was. They may have some idea of the age, but that's about it. And they always ask, how did you figure out all this information? And so this is kind of a sharing of how I find those things. The examples that will be used today are all from Wheeling and Ohio County because that's what I'm most familiar with. I will say that we're very lucky here in Ohio County that we have a pretty high-tech county clerk and assessor, and so we have a lot of online resources that may not be available in other parts of the state or in other states. I just don't know. And I'm sure that there are other tools that I'm not aware of. These are the ones that I use a lot. And, you know, every time I look, it seems like there's something else that can be used. But again, these are what I use, and they come in very handy. This webinar will also be recorded, and we'll be able to share the link afterwards. So if you know of anyone who would be interested in watching this and wasn't available, or if you'd like to watch it again, I plan to zip through pretty quickly. I'm not using the internet live. There are just too many options for issues that way. So I have done a lot of screen captures. So I won't be able to click on anything and go to any place in particular. Jamie will be monitoring the chat room. We'll probably wait till the end for general questions, but if there's anything pertaining to a particular slide, just let her know and she can ask me. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to do deed research? That's a question. I hope you can see 827 Main Street, which is the sample that I'll use here. Sometimes we want to research our own properties. Sometimes we're, like with Friends of Wheeling, we're going to tour a building and we want to research it for the owners, or we might want to buy a building and know something more about it, or we might be working with a realtor and the realtor could use that information to help market the building. Or maybe, like many of us, we're just plain nosy. And that's kind of me in a nutshell. So let me move on As I said, the property that we're going to be researching is 827 Main Street, which we have referred to as the Red Cross Building. The first thing that you might want to do is check to see if the building is on the National Register. So the state has a listing of all National Register districts and buildings online. And so, of course, since we're Ohio County, we'll pick Ohio County. Then scroll down the list, and the building happens to be in the North Wheeling Historic District. And then if you click on that, you will get a detailed accounting of that district. So there'll be some background information there. There are 115 structures in this district, and so you'll have to scroll down a good bit to find the one that we're looking for. And if we do that, here we see 827 North Main Street, and they already have an estimate on the date that it was built. When people do a nomination for the National Register and they have something like 115 buildings, they may not go into a whole lot of research to find the actual construction date. And so I'm always a bit suspicious of what's here. Not that I question their expertise, but you just never know where that came from, especially this sentence that says it's offset with a two-story rear wing built in 1867. And I have found no evidence of that, so I'm very curious as to how they came up with that. You'll see that it's called the List House, which tells us a little bit about it also. Then we go to my most favorite website, or one of my two most favorites, and this is relatively new as far as I know. It's the West Virginia Property Viewer. And as you can see from the map that's there, the entire state is covered. And so when you pull up this website, you can search by a street address or by other things. So in this case, we know the street address. So I will just enter 827 Main Street. And then it brings up information about that particular parcel. You'll see a parcel ID, and it's a good idea to make note of that. The important numbers there are W43B 0007. We can scroll, we see a map or part of a map that identifies where that property is. And sure enough, it looks like where it should be. And so that's good. We scroll on down and see a link where we can look at an aerial view. And if we click on that, then we can see the building as it would look like from a drone. And so you can see a general outline of the roof, so you can see the shape of the building. And sure enough, there is an extra a wing on the back that was referenced in the National Register description that could have been added later on. So we'll go back to here. You'll see also that the address is listed and a place at the bottom to click here for parcel assessment report. If we click on that link, we get a lot of other information. We get the physical address, the parcel ID again, the W43B 0007. What's very important is this book and page number. And so when you're researching, make sure you write that down. And then a brief legal description. Old Town, Lot 20, and part of Lot 19. That's also very important information. And then if you're interested in buying this property, for instance, or selling it, you'll see what the land and building appraisals are. Scrolling on down, we find again the year that it was built, 1858. And again, I'm not sure how they determine this information, but it does agree with the National Register information. Scrolling on down more, we find a parcel history. This only goes back to 2005. And of course, we know that building was there long before that. And so we do see the most recent owner, Wheeling List House LLC. And then further down, we can see the book and page number, again, which is very important, and the land and building assessment values, which we saw once before. And if we look on down, we'll see the next most recent owner, Friends of Lyceum LLC, and a different book and page number for the deeds. So those are important things to note, but you saw how easy it was to get there, and so you can go back to this link if you didn't jot everything down. So going back again to the property viewer map, the same one that we had before, there is an item at the top called layers, and one of the layers is delinquent properties. If you click on that, you'll see our property, and I inserted this arrow, so that's not there automatically, but you'll see the little symbol that shows which property you're interested in. And then other properties in the neighborhood that have been somehow involved in a delinquent property sale or offer or whatever. This might be important if you're going to buy a property and you might not want a property that's surrounded by a bunch of others that have tax sale implications. Delinquent properties might make it less valuable than otherwise. Another one of the options in the layer pull down is flood zones. Now we see our property again with a little symbol on it, W43B-7. And to the left of that, which would be to the west geographically, is actually the Ohio River. And so of course that's a floodway. This particular map doesn't show us much of any interest. There's another property that Friends of Wheeling is somewhat involved with that I'd like to just pull up as an aside. This is a property in South Wheeling, and you'll see the property that is outlined in blue, and it is partially in a suspected flood zone, or maybe that's the higher level flood zone, and then the red is definitely in the flood zone. And then I have surrounded in a red box the statement, parcel appears to be high-risk flood hazard zone. This can have implications in the property as far as insurance is concerned if you have a mortgage on the property. So it's important information to learn. Another favorite site that I have used a lot gives me some similar information, and this is the Ohio County Assessor's page. This is a page, again, that is done through Ohio County, but I believe most other counties have a similar page that may or may not have as much information as ours. One of the choices on the left is search property records. If we click on that, we have a screen here where we can enter the parcel address. And when we do that, you'll see down at the bottom the information of the current owner. And I will say current in quotes because it sometimes takes them a little while to get this information in. So when I started doing this presentation, this page actually linked to the prior owner and not the current one. But this is the current one. We see the parcel ID 10W43B7, the current owner's name, the very brief legal description, Old Town Lot 20 and part of Lot 19, and the street address. If we click on the parcel ID link, it takes us to this page, which shows us a good bit of information. Who the current owner is, what their mailing address is, and a bit of the sale history. Quite often, there's not much in that sales history box. In this case, we know the sale price for several different sales, which is handy. And we see book and page numbers for most recent two sales, which are there. We go back to the assessor's office and or assessor's webpage, and instead click on GIS map instead of the property records. This now is my very favorite website. It is just Ohio County. So instead of the map of the entire state, we only have the map of the county. Up in the upper left corner, we would type in the street address, which is 827 Main Street. And again, we have that, that drone view of the property with a box that pops up. It shows that the address is 827 Main Street, and we can click on the property itself, not on the box that popped up, but on the parcel itself, and this box comes up. And this is absolutely the most phenomenal tool that I have found, and it is, as far as I know, fairly recent. So you'll see, again, same kind of information. We have our parcel information, W43B-7, and several links that we can click on. The IAS details doesn't tell me very much, but the first thing I'll do is click on the PRC More Info, the third item down in that window. If we click on that, we get, that's the property record card.
Can I jump in
Again, yes,
and present
sure.
you with a question from the chat about the previous slide? Charles
Yes.
is wondering if the boxes on the GIS map are the official property lines.
I believe so. I believe they are the property lines.
Thank you.
Okay, so back on the PRC, the property record card, you get the same kind of information that we sort of have already. We've got the sale price, we've got the appraised values, we've got the address, we've got the owner, and so forth. The best thing, though, that I have found is in this pop-up box, the map card link. And those of us who have done a lot of this have used map cards before. It's a card like this. It's actually a card that's in a box like a library file box. And here is a piece of paper that shows all kinds of information that's important. There's the legal description. Looks like it's changed a bit over time, but Old Town Lot 20 and part of Lot 19 up at the top. On the left, our map number again, WH43B. Yep, we've got the right place. Wheeling List House LLC, the current owner, and down at the bottom, 827 Main Street. That actual street address doesn't always show up on the map cards, I will say. And then we have information on some of the prior owners, along with the deed book and page numbers. And you see going back that item number 1 was the American Red Cross, and they actually had their offices there. And so that's why locals usually refer to this building as the Red Cross building. Haven't been there for a long time, but traditionally we refer to it. The deed book and page numbers on the right are essential for doing the deed search. So you will want to jot those down and keep track of who the owners were that showed up on those deed book pages, the book numbers and the page numbers. So we also see that the earliest transaction on this map card was from 1946, and we have a deed book and a page number for that. Now, after you've done this for a while, you can take a look at a building and you can say, hey, you know, that was built much earlier than 1946. There must have been some earlier sales, but this is all that shows on the map card. We know there was, well, we think there were earlier sales, and our references on earlier links told us actually 1858. we'll have to do some additional research to find those earlier sales. If you can't get to the map cards online, you should be able to get to them in your county assessor's office. And this is an actual poorly taken photograph of the map card file boxes in our county assessor's office. That's on the second floor of the city county building in Wheeling. And you pull those drawers open and it's kind of like the old-fashioned library card box. So that's when you would need the W43B-7. So you'd go in the file drawer that was for W43B and pull it open and go to card number 7 to find the card that I showed you. So if all else fails, you can do this. Okay, so now you have deed book and page numbers to start researching. Our county clerk's website looks like this, but it takes a bit to get to the page that you want. You would need to scroll down to online record search, and from there, select search for Ohio County land records. And you will then be taken to a page that looks like this. Now, this page comes in so handy that I have just bookmarked this particular page and I skip going to the county clerk's main website and I just go straight here. This is where we can actually get to see a picture of the deed itself. So we will pull down the left pull down to book and page. We know the most recent deed transaction was in book 985, page 569. And if we enter that, and you actually have to type those numbers in and then hit return or enter to go to here, we see two listings there. One, which is a copy of the deed that refers to the grantor, the person who sold the property, and the second one, an image for the deed from the perspective of the grantee, the person who bought the property. Both of these images are identical, so it doesn't matter which one you click on. Then to the right of that is a more detailed description, legal description, than what we had before. So we click on image, excuse me, and it pulls up an image of the actual deed. And you'll see there in the upper right corner, book 985, page 569, and you'll see stolen copy all over there. The county clerk doesn't want you to use these as legal documents. And if you need an actual copy of this deed for whatever reason, you go to the county clerk's office and pay them a few dollars and you get a legal copy of the deed. So we see the date that the deed was transacted. The grantor, that is to whom the property is going, was the Wheeling List House LLC. And you'll usually see something like for consideration of the sum of $10. That's not the sale price. That's the fee that the county clerk charged to file this. So don't think, wow, this is a really cheap house, because it wasn't. The grantee is the first person listed. That's the Friends of Lyceum. And then, of course, the grantee, as I said, is who is purchasing that. If we scroll on down, we find the more detailed description of the property. And you'll notice that there are actually two parcels. There is parcel number 1, which is lot 20 and part of lot 19, and parcel 2, which is lot 21. So at this point, there are two parts to this property. We're only interested in the part that has the house on it. So we're only interested in parcel 1. And so that is the thread that we'll follow. Sometimes, especially in a will situation, there will be multiple different properties that are listed in one deed. And so that's why it's important to keep track of the legal descriptions so you know you have the right property. If we scroll on down, you'll see the words that you want to find in every single one of these being the same property that was conveyed. So that will tell you the more recent deed transaction and the date. So in 2011, that was when the Friends of Lyceum acquired the property, and their deed is on book number 830 and page 304. So you'd go back to that same search page and enter that information and go back through the process until you can't go any further. You will also see in this deed the sale price, which was $325,000. This is not on all deeds, so you will not expect to find that there. And you'll also find a signature of whoever was the president or the legal representative of the seller. In this case, you can't read the handwriting, but sometimes you're curious. Now, just who was this Friends of the Lyceum? And you can take a look to see if you can read the signature. If not, you can go into the county clerk's office and look up Friends of Lyceum as a company and see who the principals were of that. All right, so now, I would highly recommend that you start with the most recent deed and make your way back one by one by one by one. One reason why is you may find additional information in those deeds. And sometimes it's fascinating information. For instance, I looked up a deed once and the deed said in it that the property could never be sold to a German or Irish descendant. And so, of course, that's not legal anymore. It may have been at the time that deed was written, but it's not anymore. And that's kind of interesting. You might also find will information, that sort of thing. Other restrictions on the property, what it can and can't be used for instance. So again, I highly recommend that you go step by step by step. But on our map card, we knew which one was the earliest one that was listed. And if we enter the book and page number that was the earliest one listed, the 1946 one, we enter 286 for the book and 202 for the page, and we get stuff that has nothing to do with this property. Property deeds that came before 1935 cannot be accessed correctly as we did with the first search. And so we have to go through a slightly different process. We do know that book and page number though, so we write that down somewhere so we remember. And then we click on Vault Search up at the top. That brings up a page that looks like this, and we click on Image Search, pull down to Deed Book, and don't worry that it says image not available, and then enter the book and page number, and lo and behold, there is that deed, the entire copy of that deed. So that is.
We have a quick question from the chat. We are wondering if you're allowed to print copies of this that have the stolen copy watermark on them.
Yes, you can print them, but you cannot use those as a legal document. But if you wanted to print them just for your own research information, yes, you can do that. All right, so I went back and back and back and back, and we're thinking that the property the house was built in 1858. So I can go clear back doing that deed search step by step by step to 1855. Now, at this point, the deeds were handwritten, so make sure you teach your kids and grandkids how to read cursive. And we find that James Maxwell of the first part, so he would be the seller, sold the property for $5,500. Now that, may not sound like a lot of money now, but I'll talk about that in just a minute. Being the same that was conveyed to James Maxwell on that very same day by Moses C. Good, a trustee. Now, since these two transactions were on the same day, I suspect that James Maxwell was some sort of representative or a lawyer or something like that. And so I doubt that he built the property in one day. And so I don't think his name means much to us. But Moses C. Good might. And again, we have a date, May 25th of 1855. So we go back to the vault search. Now here's where it gets a little bit tedious. You may have noticed, and let me go back again, that it does not say a deed book and a page. So we know who was the owner in 1855, and that was Moses C. Good. We know the day and year that he acquired the property, but we don't know the deed book and the page number. So we go back to the vault search. Now we pull down the deed index for grantees. Now, Moses Good was the grantee on this particular deed that we just referenced. So how did he get the property? He was the grantee, and we know the date was 1855, so it's in this range. So we select that. Then we pull down the next screen to G for good. And we have to go through several pages, usually, to find where all of the deeds where anyone whose last name was Good was referenced. And it happened to be on page 7 of this grantee book. And we'll see there that transactions with the last name Good or Goods are on page 21. So now we pull down page 21 and scroll down until we find the right one. And there we have Moses C. Good. The DO on the left is ditto. So all of those are people whose last name is Good. And we find that Moses C. Good acquired the property in 1853, which is important, from Thomas Johnston Jr., and it is lot 20 on the west side of Main Street. You'll see that M.C. Good or Moses Good must have been a property broker of some sort because he had a lot of transactions. So chances are he did not own the property and build a house on it. He just has too many properties going on and they seem to be moving quickly. But that tells us another book and page number to go to. Now we can go back to image search, go to the deed book, pull down to deed book, enter the book number and page that was just referenced, and there is the deed from 1853. Now it happened to be on 2 different pages, and so that's why there's the little break in there. But it shows that Thomas Johnston sold the property to Moses C. Good, and it is lot number 20, and so we know it's the right property. And so we could go back further from this. For the purposes of today's talk, I'm not going to, but you might feel comfortable by going all the way back to the Zanes, who were the first settlers in Wheeling and sold property in the downtown. But we're not going to do that today. All right, then vault search again, image search. Sometimes a deed will reference a will. And so wills are also public information. So you can go, if you know, in this case, one of the deeds referenced a will. And so we'll go to the will book pull down. We'll enter the book and page number. And here is a will from Henry K. List. And remember, the property was referred to as the List House. And he is leaving everything to his wife. So now we know Henry K. List's wife's name. And his 3 sons are the ones who are going to administer his estate. Daniel C. List Jr., Ambrose List, and John List are sons. And this will was made in 1894. If you can't get to this information online in your county, you should be able to go into the county clerk's office and actually pull out the big deed books and look these up, and they are numbered, both book numbers and page numbers. I will warn you that the books are very heavy, at least they are in Ohio County. This office is also on the 2nd floor of the Wheeling City County building if you need to access the actual books. Well, I'm interested now. I want to know who this Henry K. List was. Another of my favorite sites is the Vital Records site. And if you go here, you'll see on the left side near the bottom, we can search under birth, death, and marriage. Today, we'll just be looking at the death of Henry K. List. We know he was alive at least to 1894 because that's when he wrote a will. I did search for information on birth and marriage and didn't find anything there. So we click on death. We enter List as the last name, Ohio County, and I put as a first name H with an asterisk, and I'll explain that in just a minute. On the right side, you will see the listing by county of when there were death records available. In Ohio County, death records go back to 1853, but then there are gaps here and there. So you may or may not be able to find a death record for someone from way back. Now, I entered H question mark or H asterisk because this will provide to us everyone in Ohio County with a last name list and a first name that started with an H. So we might have Henry, we might have Helen, we might have Hortense, we might have anything that started with an H. And here, sure enough, it's a good thing we did that because I find 2 records, both for the same person, both with the same death date. And so I would have missed that second option if I had not used the asterisk. Just as a side note, the asterisk can go anywhere in a name. So for example, if we're looking up Robert Hazlett, who owned a house that Friends of Wheeling now owns, his name is spelled Hazlett, but in all the death records online, there's a mistake and it's spelled Haizlett. So it took me forever to find his death record, but if I put an H and an asterisk and then a T at the end, then I was able to find his death record. Now, there are 2 places to click on here. You can click on his name, and then you will get a typed summary. Those are good because they're legible, but everything might not be there, and whoever transcribed the information might have made a mistake. So I prefer to click on the links on the right side that tells how many kilobytes the image would be. So I clicked on the first one there and I came up with this listing, and again, it's written in cursive. There's Henry K. List, and I didn't show the entire width of this, but we can see from this record that he was a white male, he was married. At the time he died, he was 78 years, 7 months, and 8 days old. We also can find on this, if you keep looking to the side, that his parents, where his parents were born and where he was born. The second item, if I listed, had the same information, except that it also showed that he died of old age. So you'll get some kinds of information. Newer death records will have more information. So we could subtract 78 years, 7 months, and 8 days from his death date to determine his birth date, which might come in handy. And sure enough, it does if you are looking up information for him on Find a Grave. Now, so far, I will say that every one of these links that I'm showing you is free, completely free. And this is a very handy one, and this grows as we speak. But this is not a primary source. A primary source is something that was prepared at the time of the person's life or death. This is newer information that has been added by someone. And so there are always opportunities for mistakes when this happens. But in this case, I put, and I'll go back, I put his name, I put his last name, and I would recommend, and I didn't do the arithmetic, I just took 78 from 1900 and got 1822 for the year he was born. And when I entered that with his death date and Ohio County, West Virginia, it didn't pull up anything. Well, here he actually was born in 1821. You don't have to put the year he was born in there. But if you do, I would recommend that you use the plus or minus a year or 3 years or whatever so that you don't miss this. And then click on search. And this comes up for Henry Kilbourne List Sr. So we have his actual birth date. We have where he was born, where he died, where he's buried. Down below is additional information. We found in his will that his wife's first name was Sarah. Now we know her maiden name. We know when she was born and died. And remember, he died in 1909, so she outlived him by 9 years, which might matter as to finding who actually lived in that house. We see his parents' name, John List and Hannah Carter List. And each of these you'll see is a link and can take us to information on those people. Scrolling on down, we see the names of Henry List's siblings and his children, and also his half-siblings. Now, you may notice that his mother died in 1823. Well, he was born in 1821, so he was just a toddler when his mother died. And so it looks like his father remarried, but there's no listing of a second spouse on that page. So I was curious, and I clicked on his father's name, John List, and this came up. And there's a bit of biographical information. He was widowed in 1823, and then he married another lady whose first name was Anne, and that pops up later, so you might keep track of that, and when they were married. So that information is important. Also, the names of the children. If you're trying to find descendants of someone who owned a house, this can help follow a thread based on children and their children and their children and so forth, if this information is on Find a Grave. Now, I will say that there are probably hundreds of volunteers who go around the countryside to cemeteries and enter this sort of information. It's very valuable, but again, it's not a primary source, and so there may be mistakes that have gotten inserted along the way. Another very valuable resource are newspapers. Gee, it'd be good to have his obituary. So in Ohio County, we have access to newspapers that go way back. And if you scroll down this screen, you'll see that newspapers go back quite a ways. And these have been digitized. We enter his name. We know when he died. He died on June 30th or June 29th, I forget, of 1900. So I'm going to put a couple days ahead of time and a couple days after. Sometimes people are not considerate enough to die in Wheeling. And so their remains are brought back, and the obituary may not appear in the newspaper for several days. Or sometimes the date that's listed as a death date is actually an interment date, and the death date actually precedes that date by a few days. So give yourself a little bit of latitude here. And then click on Discover, and we find two references. Now, since his last name was List, and that's what I entered, you'll also find references to newspapers that talk about, I don't know, a Christmas list or a list of survivors or whatever. So you may have to scroll a bit to get the ones that you want. But here we have this, and as you'll see on the second one, the transcriptions for these little blurbs are somewhat unhelpful. So you'll want to click on the newspaper itself. And here we have the Wheeling Daily Register for May 29th. This was the day he died, and there is an obituary. And you can find out all kinds of information in obituaries if this person was a fairly well-known person. There actually is a sketch of what he looked like. And here is the parallel obituary in our other newspaper, the Intelligencer, and a different sketch. And sometimes those obituaries are identical, but back at this time, they usually were different. And again, you'll find a lot of interesting information. Now, if you live someplace other than Ohio County, and in fact, anywhere in the country, you can use a website from the Library of Congress that's called Chronicling America. Now, remember, all of these website links are on the document that will be provided at the end. So I pull down on the search page to West Virginia, and I only want the year 1900, and I enter the word list, and then over to the right side, click on Go, and lo and behold, I get the Intelligencer, the very same article that I saw before. If you're really interested in this man, you might enter different dates and find out newspaper articles from other events or things that he was involved with. He might also be in the Wheeling Area Genealogical Society's list of biographies. So here's this link, click on biographies, and you'll see various collections that were compiled periodically on more well-known people in Wheeling. I did a search, you'll see up in the upper right-hand corner under the word list, and it says there are two matches. Neither one is Henry, but one of them was John List, who was Henry List's father. So I clicked on that and found two interesting references. One is that one of John List's sons, so this would be Henry's brother, John, was accidentally killed in Wheeling by a provost guard in 1865. And this would be something of interest to look up just because you're nosy. Also, toward the right side, again, this is John List's biography. So this is Henry's father. John was a cashier of a bank at the time that it was robbed of $70,000 in 1832. And so that's something that would also be intriguing to look up more on. We can also go to our public library's website. We have a terrific public library here in Wheeling, and it has all kinds of information that is very valuable. If we click on research, one of the options is researching historic properties in Ohio County. And when we go to that page and scroll down, we'll see some maps that are available digitally. Now, we know when the property was transferred to Henry, but we don't know when the house itself was actually built. So sometimes a map will help. The ones that are available digitally are listed here, and you'll see that they go back as far as 1853. I'm going to go to that map, and locate the right neighborhood, and you'll see there Main Street with lot 20 and lot 19 next door. You'll see to the left of lot 20, which would be to the north, is an alley. And then lot 21, which later was acquired as part of the two parcels that were referenced early on. You'll see the cross street to the south, to the right, is Jefferson Street. Now, street names changed in 1873, and so I've included a link to a listing of the old street names and the new street names. Street numbers also changed about this same time, and so just because we see a street number as it is now does not mean that was the actual house number back in the day. Here's the 1871 digital map. And by then, oh gee, the house looks pretty much like the aerial view that we saw before. There's the addition on the rear. We see it's lot 20. To the right is lot 19, so he acquired part of that property. To the left or to the north is an alley, and then, oh, property owned by Mrs. Ann List. Aha, remember his stepmother's name was Anne, and so she lived right next door. There are also copies, hard copies of several different maps in the library, and you can make an appointment at the library to actually see these. This is a very poor photograph from 1889 Atlas, but it shows pretty much the same thing. We have the outline of the structure. We have a lot number, and we have Main Street, and by now the streets have the current cross street names that we have now. So 8th Street is to the north, for instance. And here's one more digital map that's available through the library. Now to the left or to the north, there are two properties that are marked as being owned by E. Hazlett and John List. And we find later, as we research this, that Henry acquired lot 21 and had houses built for his daughter, who married Edward Hazlett, his daughter Jessie, and his son John. So rather than the mother-in-law living next door, his two kids lived there. Now, we'll also notice that there are names on this map, and this property is the home of Mrs. H.K. List. Why would it be Mrs.? Well, this is 1901, and recall that Henry died in 1900. So apparently his widow remained in the house. There are also a set of maps that are the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps. Sanborn Fire Insurance Company apparently went around the country and made detailed maps of properties that were used to determine fire insurance rates. According to their website, they actually made maps clear up to 1955, but I've never seen any new ones. The old ones, though, are phenomenal. So to find them, you can go to the Library of Congress website. And again, these can be found all over the country, not just in West Virginia. We can do a search, and this is the one we want. This is an 1890 Sanborn map. And you'll see in the blue bar at the bottom that there are actually 35 maps in the sequence here. The front page is an overview, and this is a page that shows the 35 different maps that are included. Notice that they're just called MH1, MH2, and so forth. Doesn't really tell you which neighborhood, so you'll have to figure that out yourself. Image 1, as I said, was an overall map, and if we look at it and zoom in, we'll see that we actually want map 8, which is between 8th Street and 10th Street. And so we scroll through the list until we find map 8, and here, sure enough, is the house. This actually has a mistaken street number on it. But we know this is it because it's right next to an alley and it's the right shape and so forth. The pink color is representative of a brick building, and the yellow is representative of frame. And so we have a brick building with wooden porches. The D in the middle of the building represents a dwelling, and the 2 tells us it's a 2-story building. There's also a brick barn to the rear and a frame outbuilding of some sort also to the rear of the property. Here is a 1902 Sanborn map, pretty much the same information, except now the correct street number is there. And we can see to the north, up in this map, the 2 properties that were lived in by the son and daughter. Another good resource is census records. You can go to the Wheeling Room in the Ohio County Public Library and look at hard copy. And I'm just going to zip through the ones. We have an 1850 census that lists Henry with his wife Sarah and 2 of their children, Daniel, who was 5 at the time, and Mary, who was 1, along with 2 other people who lived in the home, a male who was Irish and a female who was German. They were probably live-in servants. 1860 census, similar information, although Mary is no longer there. Daniel, who was 5 in the prior census, is now 14, depending on when the census was taken during the year. Mary should have been about 10, and she's not there, which would suggest that she died in the interim. And then 3 other children and still 2 servants. There's the 1870 census, the 1880 census. There is no 1890 census. There was a big fire in Washington, D.C. in the National Archives, and the majority of those records were destroyed. Now, we can also go online and find census records clear up to 1950, I believe. The easiest way to do this is just enter 1850 census. Don't say anything else. Don't say Wheeling, don't say West Virginia. Just see 1850 census, period. And you'll see several options there. My favorite is the family search one. Again, this is free. You may have to sign up to use it, but there's no charge. You go there, you enter the person's name, now you enter the place, and in this case, the year that he was born, and there, this pops up, and we have the 1850 census. On the left is typed information, and on the right is the actual digital copy, the actual original document. At the bottom is how to officially cite this record. So if you're doing this for a class or something and you need to cite your source, there it is. And then if you click on the original document, you will see the actual 1850 census as it appeared handwritten. Now, in this case, Henry happened to be at the bottom of the page before, so I don't show him, but we see certain information that's there. We have his wife, Sarah, her age, she's a female, where she was born, and so forth. Daniel, the check mark for Daniel shows that he was in school at that time. And the other children, and we've got a laborer living there from Ireland and a female from Germany living with them. Interesting information also is the date that the census record was taken. So this can help with ages and so forth. And this is curious. The census taker was none other than B.F. Kelly. And local people will recognize this as Benjamin Franklin Kelly, who a few years later was the colonel in charge of the 1st West Virginia Infantry in the Civil War, and later became a general in the Civil War. The information on the right shows the block 10 is where you married in the past year. Number 11, attended school within the year, and that's where Daniel is marked. Item 12, persons over 20 years of age who cannot read and write, and none of those is marked. And item 13 is whether deaf and dumb, blind, insane, idiotic, pauper, or convict, and none of those is marked in this particular year. Now, these records were organized geographically rather than alphabetically, and that can be an advantage because you can see who their neighbors were in 1850. Here's the 1860 census, similar information. We find Henry is a merchant. The numbers that are there to the right, $15,000 is the value of his property at the time. $130,000 is the entire value of his estate. So his personal, let me see, his real estate is the first number, $15,000. Now we can go to an inflation calculator and see what that would mean in today's money. And it's about $517,000 of his real estate value. And his personal estate, $130,000 in 1860, is about the same as $4.5 million today. So he's doing pretty well for himself. We have the 1870 census. Information there includes the same values. His real estate valued at $75,000, which today would be about $1.8 million, and his personal estate, $200,000, which today would be close to $5 million. So again, he's doing pretty darn well. Sorry, let me go back just a minute. I didn't show the other columns there, but they include the fact that his parents and Sarah's parents were foreign born. There's a listing of 5 children at that time. They didn't have any live-in servants then. One thing, and this is 1870, remember, but one item that you could check is male citizens of U.S. of 21 years of age and upwards whose right to vote is denied or abridged on other grounds than rebellion or other crime. So this is post-Civil War. I thought that was an interesting thing to mark on a census. That was not marked for Henry or anyone in his family. And here's the 1880 census. Same kind of thing. Everybody's 10 years older. This shows that his parents were born in England and hers in Ohio. Another one showed that her parents were born in Pennsylvania, so we're not sure. So even primary sources can have discrepancies. There's no listing of real estate or personal estate values on this. They had 2 live-in servants. Item 15, which isn't marked, is the person on the day of the enumerator's visit sick or temporarily disabled so as to be unable to attend to ordinary business or duties. If so, what is the sickness or disability? Every census, it seems like they ask different questions. It would be interesting if they had asked the same questions throughout on some of these. Again, there are no records for 1890. Here's the 1900 census. Sarah is listed as the head of the household. Remember, Henry died in 1900. And if we look up at the top, which I don't show you on the screen capture, the census was taken on June 1st of 1900. He died on May 29th. So this was just taken just a couple days after he passed away. But she is now the head of the household. The address is clearly marked there, 827 Main Street. It's on the left. We have the children who are still living at home. They're adults by this time. We have some misspellings there. The son is Ambrose. It looks like Amboza, but we know from other records it's Ambrose. Hattie, a daughter, is still living at home, even though both Hattie and Ambrose are in their 40s. He's 46, she's 44. They still are at home. And everyone here in the list attended school and can read, write, and speak English. Now, just out of curiosity, I went back to the 1840 census. And at this point, Henry was just a young man and probably living at home. We don't know yet when he was married, but we find a listing for John List, that was Henry's father. And under the category of males between the ages of 15 and 20, we have 1 check mark. Henry would have been in this range at that point, and so that's probably Henry represented by that check mark. City directories are also good because they can tell us who actually lived there. And I know we're past an hour, but I'm going to keep going. Again, this will be recorded if you need to leave us. City directories are in the Wheeling Room in the public library. And again, if you go to the public library's research page under genealogy resources, you'll find a listing of the Wheeling City directories that they have there in hard copy, and also a link of city directories that are available through Heritage Quest. Heritage Quest is a really great resource for city directories. You click on a link on the library's website, and if you are a library card member, if you have a library card for High County Public Library, you enter your barcode in the screen there and can connect for free. I think otherwise there is a charge to get onto Heritage Quest, although you can get on it in the library itself. So we connect there and we click on city directories. You'll see there are other interesting things if you get bored and want to look up other information. We go to city directories. I am entering his last name, first name and last name, and Wheeling. I am not entering a year because I want to see every city directory that's available for him. And we go there and we find a bunch. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through the city directories. Some of these are references from the hard copy at the library. Others are from the Heritage Quest link. They don't duplicate each other, or they don't seem to. So here's a listing in 1843, John List, that would be the father, is at 257 Main Street. Remember, street numbers are different now, but I don't think that's the same house. Henry would have been a young man at this point. We don't even have a listing for him. 1851, we finally have a listing for Henry. He is a wholesale grocer with the HKL and Company, most likely Henry K. List and Company, and his residence is 99 Market Street. Well, that's not the address of the house we're interested in. 1856-57, he is with a different firm. They are also wholesale grocers, but he lives on the west side of Market Street between Quincy and Monroe. Quincy is the current 14th, Monroe is the current 12th. But either way, it's Market Street, so it's not the house we want. That's 1856, 1857, city directory. The next one that's available is 1864. And there we have Henry K. List. His home is on the west side of Main, the corner of Paw Paw Alley in the 1st Ward. Now, none of those maps identified that alley that was next to his house, but boy, this sounds suspicious. And it's 1864. So I think we can be pretty sure that between, let me go back, between 1856-57 city directory and the 1864 directory, he moved into that house. And so the 1858 estimate that we've seen before makes sense. We'll look forward a little bit. Here's 1873-75. By now, the new street names are there, and we have his residence at 827 Main Street. He's a wool dealer at this point. 1884, his residence is there. He's also president of the Children's Home. And 1890, 827 Main Street. He's now a banker and also a dealer in wool. And now we have the 1898 directory, 827. He's president of the bank, also president of the Children's Home. And now 1901. We know he's deceased by now, and Mrs. Sarah J. List lives at 827. She's the widow of Henry. She was never listed before. Now, in later city directories, a wife's name is often listed in parentheses after her husband. So far, everything I've shown you has been free. I have a subscription to Ancestry.com, and so I usually use that. There is access, free access at the Ohio County Public Library if you choose to go there. I entered his name, birth date, death date, and so forth. And there are several things here that I already have. I've already got the 1870 census. I've already got the find a grave information. I've already got his death information. I've already got his will. And so I was able to find everything that's there without having to pay for anything or without having to go to the library. But I did find one interesting bit of information as I scrolled on down, and that is his marriage certificate. He was married in 1844, so we know that information now. And in Jefferson County, Pennsylvania, that's the Steubenville area. And so that's why his marriage didn't show up on the vital records page, because he wasn't married in Ohio County. So that's a little bit of additional information that can help us with our research. And so that's the house. That's what we could find doing a relatively quick search. And I will stop now. It's about 2:15, but I'll be glad to take questions if there are any. This is the list that was referenced by Jamie before. It's every website that I mentioned during the talk. And again, every one of these is free with the exception of ancestry.com and Heritage Quest, which you can get free if you're a library card member. And
There is, oh, you go
yes,
on.
I will stop. Yes.
Oh,
Question?
I was just saying there is a question in the chat, and that is if you know if someone has a library card for the West Virginia library system, will that work on Heritage Quest or will it only work for their home library?
I can't answer that, but it's worth a try.
Jeanne, I think you have to have a library card with a bar with just a Wheeling Ohio County library card.
Well,
Because it's
although, yeah, the link that I referenced is from the Ohio County Public Library's website. So maybe other libraries around the state have a similar link that goes.
but you couldn't get into this database with the statewide library card. It has to be an OCPL library card
Okay, all
because
right,
it's connected to their database for licensing agreements.
good. Okay, thank you, Chuck. This page that's here, let me just say that, again, this whole presentation has been saved and you will be able to find it on the Preservation Alliance website or on the Wheeling Heritage website under the Friends of Wheeling link. And I will stop share then in case there are other questions. If we still have people bearing with me. And Jamie is now the host.
Hmm.
Any other questions? If not, I thank you for your attention today, and I hope this is helpful and that I didn't go through too fast. But again, it's been saved, and if you want to see various parts again, I find it fascinating to find the histories of these buildings, especially in Wheeling. We have so much history, and there's so much, I don't know, intermarriage and so forth. You'll see some of the names, that person is related to Henry List. You'll see the name Dalzell, for instance, which is another Wheeling name that comes down. So it's fun, especially if it's an interesting person or they had something interesting happen in their lives or in their death.
Jeanne, do you happen to know, does the county clerk site, do you have to download the image before you can print it? It seems to me there's some kind of restrictions when you try to print from that site that it doesn't print the image unless you pull it down.
I can't answer that either because I always just take the information from it, and I usually don't try to make a copy.
There might be another step in it, I guess is my point, that you'd have to pull it
Okay.
off as an image and then print the JPEG or put it in a document and print it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I know with Marion County, you have to actually, there's a fee before they'll let you download it. So I don't know if it's that way in Ohio County or not, but I've done a lot of research here in Marion County and in Mon County, and that's how they work it. You can look at the image, but they won't let you download it unless you pay their fee.
Okay, thank you, Joni. And that
Yep.
makes sense. I mean, they gotta support themselves.
And I think you might be able to set up an account with them so it comes off your credit card so you're able to print it without
Yes.
having to going into the office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do that, Charles. You actually set up an account with them and put your information in. That way, if you ever want to download anything, all you gotta do is click a button and it automatically just charges your card.
And a lot of this was a result of all the oil and gas research that was done in the last few years. I know our county clerk's office was just deluged with people to the point where you had to make an appointment to go in because they had way too many people. And so that is a good thing in that now everybody has access.
I see Sharon has her hand raised. Do you?
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Jean, have you ever had to go as far back to Virginia records? And if so, how did you approach that?
Okay, yes. Most websites will accept West Virginia as the state that you enter, even for dates before 1863. I've never had a problem with that. I have never researched anything that is part of old Virginia now, other counties that are not part of West Virginia, but I've never had to go to a place where I couldn't just enter West Virginia, even if it was pre-1863.
I think Carol has a question.
What did they do with all those books in at the county clerk's office?
They are still there, but they may be destroyed. They are doing some remodeling in that building. And my understanding is they will not be there forever, those books. Some of the older books, the tax records and so forth, are already in the basement of the public library because they're already digitized and they don't really need them. So, after a while, you run out of room, and they have. So I think they'll probably be destroyed. For a while, they were paying for storage in some off-site place, but it was getting more and more expensive. And so that will no longer be done once everything is digitized, is my understanding.
Thank you.
Someone did mention in the chat that they have worked with the Fayette County Library, but it had burned down around 1879. And I mentioned that for instances of fire, I would rely on the Library of Congress to see what documents would have had to have been housed there even at that time. But do you have any other tips for people that may have, similar issues of, documents being destroyed, if there's any other resources for them?
In some cases, there are no resources like the 1890 census. They don't exist. There are a few, a few counties in, Idaho or someplace that weren't burned. There's also the special census of Civil War veterans that survived, but otherwise, when they're gone, they're gone. But I would try every one of these sources that I've listed: Library of Congress, Find a Grave, Ancestry, all of those things, because some people may have digitized things. It's hard to tell.
I also wanted to note for, I believe it was Charles, you asked about Sanborn map abbreviations, and I did post a link in the comments to MIT's abbreviation list, but I will add that link to our document of websites just so other people can have access to that as well. That's the one I use in my research, is the MIT abbreviation page. So does anyone else have questions?
Jeanne, I might just mention that in a local newspaper article, the county clerk said that they can't get rid of all the books yet, but they're hoping they will have legislation passed that they'll be able to dispose of them. So right now, legally, they can't do it. They can store them off-site if they need to, but it will take legislation to actually destroy them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All
Okay,
right, looks like that's all the questions. So again, thank you for your attention and happy searching.
I'm gonna stop
Thank
the
you.
recording now.